I'm glad you've joined us on the interview. You may not realize it yet, but your life is about to change. Welcome to another episode of The Interview. I'm Dr. Rick Flodge with some dear friends for our second week together. This is Moshe and Leah Goldsmith, Rabbi Moshe. And so you went to yeshiva, you studied, and long process?
Wow, that's a very interesting question. My whole life as an Orthodox rabbi today, but I grew up in a religious home, an Orthodox home in Brooklyn, New York, in Flatbush. And there my parents wanted their children to have a good yeshiva what's the word?
Upbringing. So are there many Jews in Brooklyn?
Oh, wow. There are many of us out there. So I went I was traveling to a couple of different yeshivot. I remember I went as a child to 3 different yeshiva programs when I was young, elementary school. One of them was very special. It was called Rambam Day School. Mm-hmm. And that's where I met my wife, Leah. She was in the girl section, but she picked me out over there. She picked her husband out.
You said, Hashem, I'll take that one.
Yeah, because Hashem needed to use us.
Yes.
So,
and he needed you.
We were
Yeah. Believe me, I'm his personal valet.
What is a rabbi without a good wife?
Oh, man.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, she rectifies her husband. We always told we were old then, but look how God brought us together. We didn't see each other 7 years, and then we were meeting again. We were like 19 years old. I was graduating college, a bio major in Brooklyn College, thinking of pre-medicine. But I met Leah again. She goes, we're going to Israel. Mm-hmm. We got married, moved to Israel.
Oh, almost immediately.
God said,
21 years old, we were married.
God said to Abraham, listen to your wife.
Right. Shema. Right.
No, do you understand what she's really trying to say here? I'm trying to read between the lines, but there's nothing between the lines. It's just all message.
Whatever it was, we made Aliyah. We say Aliyah to go up. Aliyah. We came to Israel and we were looking for a place to live. And we found we spent a year learning, studying Torah in Jerusalem. Both of us, she went to a women's seminar, I went to a man's seminary, to the yeshiva program. And then we found the beautiful community just starting out in Itamar, in the hills of Itamar, the biblical mountains of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I went to a program nearby, in a nearby community, where I became a rabbi. I studied for 13 years. And that's when I got ordained as a rabbi of the Israeli government, a special, you have to take a few different exams. It's a very, very complicated, long, drawn-out program. And I also became a teacher and educator as well. And I was involved in the formation of a high school on our community called Chitzim. That's the name of the school.
Which means?
Arrows, literally means arrows. It comes from a verse in Psalms, Chitzim biyad gibor, as an arrow, bow and arrow in the hands of a war hero. Ken Yimei Anurim, the same way as the days of a child growing up in the youth. Because just like an arrow, when you shoot an arrow, if it's a little off target, it's going to go way off target. So you got to direct those students in a precise way. So we got invited, I got very involved in this whole education thing, teaching Torah to high school children, which eventually we look at as they grow up and become leaders of Israel. Today we see we can reap the fruit of our work. Mm-hmm. We see them growing in the land and building communities and establish themselves in the Israeli army and society. We're very proud of our students, and that's how I got involved in teaching when I moved to Israel. And Leah herself was an educator. She was teaching as well.
But your teaching blossomed into other realms of teaching.
Of course, I go on from that. Besides being a rabbi and just teaching high school children, but I also teach other classes in the community itself. And I began to reach out to the world, to the nations of the world, and I give classes to those who want to connect to God and the Jewish people through the Torah. So I give lessons like that every week. And I've been involved in, I'm writing a few different books now. And I think it's growing all the time. I feel it's a tremendous need to hear the message of Torah in the world and what Israel is doing.
Why is that? Well, why is it important for the whole world to understand Torah?
Well, because if we look at the Torah is really a blueprint. It's a plan, a divine plan for the world. And And what are we doing here as human beings, this entire world? What are we all doing in this, walking the earth here for this 120 years, 70 years, 80 years, 120 years? What are we doing here? And in this, again, a world was surrounded by so much distractions and so much noise out there. But our job, and the word for world in Hebrew is called olam. Olam means in Hebrew, lahalim, to hide. God is hidden in the world. And our job as human beings is to discover the creator of the universe, to make a relationship, to connect to him in the world. And that, we see humanity from its beginnings, from its inception. There's always been two sides. And those that are, again, we see the search, for example, in the beginning the world slowly but surely there's a movement towards perfection in the world of discovering where God is. In the beginning, the world was very into idol worship, you see. Very pluralistic form of worship. Different idols, looking and searching. But God planted within that world, surrounded by this idolatry. And then this was a search. This stems from a search to connect themselves with the God of the universe. Mm-hmm. Because every human being has an innate feeling and a connection with the God of the universe. But they don't have to bring that into fruition.
Practice.
They don't have a problem there. So God said, I'm going to plant a nation that will be able to allow every human being to connect truly to God. And that nation is called Israel. And we see the fathers of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were our fathers, but they still weren't the nation yet. The nation was when Jacob came to the land, and we were formed as a nation in Israel, in Egypt. And from there, I call them the womb of our nation. We came out of that Egyptian womb. Think about that. We were born in the most darkest, unclean place in the world, because God wants to show that the Torah could literally bring to life the most darkest and faraway places in the world. We came out of that. We came to our own country, to the land of Israel eventually, under the leadership of Joshua. We built our kingdom. We built our temple. It was a long road. And then we went downhill again. We were cast out of the land because of our sins. But as the Jewish nation never gave up hope, we were praying for 2,000 years. Let our eyes behold the return of Zion with mercy. And here we are, we came back. And the world is saying, what's going on over here? We thought it was over, but God, it just shows that God is here and he's sending us messages, and he's not just in a faraway place, disappeared, but God is hidden within the world and he's revealing himself. And that revelation is what I feel, again, you speak. Getting back to how you become a rabbi and what you're doing, but my whole story, but that's how it really begins. We feel that we're part of that. As a servant of God, we're trying to be a servant of God. That's a hard title to follow, to being a true servant of God. Moses was called a servant of God. Not many. If you look in the Bible, you won't find many that were called Moshe Avdi. Mm-hmm. And being a servant of God is really that. It's to bear his name, and to show how God connects to every aspect of our lives. And that is so important. And that's how I became a rabbi, or God has a message for all of us in life. He was pushing me in this direction, but I feel, the world is so powerful. There's so much out there, and we're touching on God in so many different areas, because the more we touch upon life, we touch upon the Creator. We find another aspect out there. But that in a nutshell is really how we got involved in maybe education and as a teacher.
There's so much there in what you just said. Right now, I didn't want to break in. I did, but
I didn't know what I was.
No,
because we're sort of drifting.
No.
But
and I would agree with every single thing you just said.
Okay.
Yes, Israel is the very center, the focal point of what's spiritually going on in the world in a positive way, and that's why we have so many attacks on Israel.
For sure, that's exactly
so much anti-Semitism.
Exactly that. It's such a focal point. People should be looking at that point, focus. But I wanted to get, because we're going to talk about Adam in the Garden of Eden a little. You want to talk about that?
Abraham and
So I mentioned that.
And rectifying.
Yeah, please do. Because
it's a great Torah.
Yeah, we didn't have any really teaching last week.
Yeah.
So in this session, please.
A little bit about how, I mentioned some things in this conversation, but okay. I'll try a little bit about where we live, because we live again on a place called Itamar, in the mountains of Shomron. And why did we come to settle, to live as pioneers in this generation on our community? What called us out there? And I always say, If you visit Itamar, you see that everywhere around our community is all, we call them the gems of the hill, because you have so many different places that go back in our history. That's how we were formed as a nation. And let's begin the journey. And I'll try to do like a virtual tour, but to understand what I'm talking about. If you go to our mountaintops and we look across, and I look to the east, we can see the Jordan Valley. And if you look further, you see the mountains of Gilead. You look further, you're looking towards, of course, Mesopotamia. And we know present-day Iraq, and Iran, that area. And that is where Abraham was born. God tells Abraham that I want you to leave your father's house, the place of your birth. I want you to go to the land I will show you. Now, I always say, and I brought this up in some of my speaking tours recently, a question, why did God tell Abraham to leave Mesopotamia? You could have said a Chabad house in Mesopotamia, Iraq. You don't know what that is all about. And be a light over there, be a little light to the nations, or be a light to the people you're around in Mesopotamia. You spoke the language, But God said to Abraham, no, I have a different plan for you. You have to leave that whole society where they're worshiping idols, and his name was Abraham HaIvri. What does Ivri mean in Hebrew? The other side. Literally means Abraham the Hebrew. But the word in Hebrew, Ever, means the other side, because he stood for the oneness of God in the world. And everyone else in the world was on the other side. But he was willing to stand against the entire world. Think about the tremendous conviction he had and the faith he had. And he was able to stand against what everyone said was the right path in the world to follow. And he was a single individual with his wife, of course. A man is not whole without his wife. So I say Abraham was with Sarah. They were together. And then God says, I have a lot of plans for you. And I want you to leave this uncleanly place where you are. I want you to come to a very special place. He didn't tell him where he was going. Go to the land I will show you. That's also a trial. It's one of the trials of Abraham. We know in our sources it talks about 10 trials that he had to go through. So one of them was that to go to a place where he doesn't know where he's going. Go. Where? Go.
Just go.
Okay, I'm going. Start to run. Start to walk.
He's always moving and running.
And in reality,
This is GPS.
Yes, that's it. That's it.
Right, so
Before Waze.
way before Waze, there was, he was the inventor of Waze, right?
Yeah.
So Abraham had to come, he had to go somewhere. But in reality, he was going back. What was he going back to? We talk about the beginning of the Torah. It begins with a story which is very spiritual, because we know the first days of creation and the whole story of the first man and woman in the world, the sin, that's all very, very deep, extremely deep, mystical teachings that we have to try to understand. And that's something that is beyond the average person studying Torah to understand what they really mean, all these deep things. And in our literature, Judaism and our spiritual teachings, there are endless seas that deal with these things. But just to touch upon an important concept, after there was a sin over there in the garden, we know that Abraham began to rectify something. That's what we always look at. If you look at history, it's always a movement of going to perfection. And we see something happen, something caused the garden to lose its position. What happened? They ate from the tree. And that caused the first exile. It was an expulsion from that garden. Man and woman had to leave. What does that remind us? It's a reflection of later on history of leaving the land, because it all begins in the Garden of Eden, and which is a central portion of Israel. That's really where Israel is located. So what happens is Abraham, after 10 generations, we know from the first man to Noah. From Noah to Abraham's another 10 generations. Right? 20 generations later, Abraham wakes up. 1948. Interesting year.
It's 1948.
The year 1948. And that is when God says,
No.
Wait,
No,
pause.
That's 1948 of creation.
Wow.
An awakening in the world. And that was when Abraham and Sarah have returned to the land of Israel.
To rectify. Leaving the garden.
And that is going back to returning to the garden after so many years of separation. And God says to Abraham, Mesopotamia, you can influence, but not from Mesopotamia. You have to be on the soil of the Garden of Eden. From Israel, the land of Israel, you'll be able to reach out to the entire world. As it says in Isaiah, Ki mitzion teitzei Torah udvar Hashem Yerushalayim. From Zion the Torah will come forth, and the word of God from Jerusalem. In other words, when you're strong in your land, that is when you will be a blessing to all the nations of the world, and the nations of the world will be blessed within you. It can only happen from Israel. And we see this, how true this is. Because God promises Abram all these promises. But what happens? Right away, as we say in Hebrew, solved, trouble. His wife passes away and he has to spend his whole fortune to buy a gravesite. Right? Don't forget about the battles, rescuing his nephew, Lot. So things are going on there. Abraham has to leave the land because of famine in the land. He has to go out to Egypt, comes back again. So we have in our teachings, we study about, and our sages talk about something being Masel Vot Siman Banim. What our forefathers go through, the same pathways we as a nation will have to follow later on in history. So we see, just like Abraham had to go through these trials and tribulations, we follow the nation of Israel will see an exact pattern to what he went through. And then, let's skip over Isaac. I always say, why do we skip over Isaac for a generation? Isaac was very unique. He never left the land of Israel. Even when there was trouble in the land, God says to Isaac, Shchon ba'aretz hazot, dwell and remain in the land. Which is a whole other teaching about Isaac. So I'm going to skip over to the generation of Jacob. Why? Because I'm talking about where we live, Itamar, the central portion of the biblical area. And I want to give you that virtual tour. So Abraham, who's being told to go to the land of Israel, go to the place I will show you, to rectify the sin of the garden. We're finally getting there.
Yes.
Where did this take place? Not in Tel Aviv.
I'm not really surprised, but
It didn't even take place in Mitzvah. God told Abraham.
he's also a comedian.
God told Abraham to go to where? The place of Shechem. And I'll say the verse in Hebrew. Just look in Genesis 12. It talks about that. It says, "Vayavor Avram ba'aretz ad mekom Shechem ad Elon Moreh." And Abraham came to the land, the place of Shechem, Elon Moreh. That's the city of Shechem. Okay? Today, the world knows this city as Nablus. Nablus is a Roman creation. They called it New City to take away any Jewish memory of an ancient city. But in reality, Shechem, that area, is where we live, Itamar. We live in the central mountain range of Shechem. That's Itamar, our community. And that is where Abraham was sent to go for the first place he came to the land of Israel. God said, go to Itamar. Go to Shechem. So then Jacob. Why there? And if we go there, we see that this must have tremendous spiritual, symbolic meaning for the journey of the people of Israel to the world. What does it mean? And if you go in our area, you were staying at those same mountains. So we turned, I said, to the east. And we looked at where Abraham came from. And now we turn our eyes to the west. And we see these two huge mountains called the mountains of Grizim, which is the mount of blessing, and the mount of the curse, hovering over the city of Shechem. Abraham goes there. And I said before, what our forefathers do is a sign for the people of Israel. What happens? Abraham continues his journey down south, eventually makes his way to Hebron, the city of the patriarchs, where he has that struggle we spoke about before of getting a place to bury his wife. But in his faith, he's always steadfast, and God, he never questions his difficulty. That's another lesson in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to focus on our virtual tour we need to run today.
Mm-hmm.
So getting back, so Abraham did that. And I said, Isaac, we skipped over now because Isaac, we don't see him in our area.
Mm-hmm.
He never left Israel, or never came from the outside. Our area of Etam represents an area where it's the doorpost, the window to the land of Israel. When you're outside the land, you're coming back into the land, you have to go through Etam. You have to go through that place of Shechem. So Jacob, who had to leave Israel, why did he have to leave Israel for?
His brother hated him.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, exactly the twin Esau versus Jacob, they had a little struggle over there, claiming that Jacob took the birthright and all that whole story. And I'm not going to go into the details, but as a result, Jacob's mother, Rebecca, what does she say? Isaac, listen, I'm nervous. Our son has to get a nice Jewish girl.
No, that's the original.
Exactly, that's what she
Yeah.
said, right? So again, she was really nervous about the brother killing him, but she wouldn't mention it to Isaac. Because Isaac was living in the highest spiritual plane. He saw the end already, the redemption. So he couldn't understand how this redheaded Esau, this hairy man, or brother would make peace with, he couldn't see how he would make war, with Jacob. But it was very clear to Rebecca, because she was with the practical, woman's side aspect of the world. She said, no way. So she knew how to talk to her husband. He can't, he has to get a Jewish woman. But he ends up coming back with 4.
No, you just made her sound like she was from Brooklyn.
Well, that's the woman he knows.
Exactly. So, but anyway.
But they come back on the same
So they
path.
come back. So he ends up spending many years because he spent time in something called Lavan. Lavan is
White.
the White House. I mean, Lavan in Hebrew means Lavan, white. He ended up spending many years in a different kind of White House right out there in the Mesopotamia world. But he went through a hard time. He had to work for many years, struggling. And finally, eventually, the time had come to return to Israel. He felt that. How do you feel it? Joseph was born. It says when Joseph was born, if you read the Bible, you will see right after the birth of Joseph, all of a sudden the spark of return to Israel comes in. It just comes up, floats ahead. So Jacob says, wait a second, I go back to Israel. It's time to go home now. And he tells Laban or Lavan, I don't know how to say it in English, Lavan we say, but I'm going back home. So the wives, they all get together, and Lavan keeps, okay, let me pay you, and keeps reversing things around and cheating him. So they decide to leave, We all know what happens over there. And Lavan chases after Jacob, and the whole story that takes place setting up that in Galeed, that monument on the mountains of Gilead. But what happens when Jacob comes back to Israel, what does he come back to? Itamar again. He comes back to the city of Shechem. It says, Vayavo Yaakov Shalem Yeshchem. Jacob comes to Shalem, a place called Shalem, the city of Shechem. What does Shalem mean in Hebrew? Do you know the Hebrew word Shalem? It comes from the word Shalom. It means perfection. To be exactly. So Jacob comes back. And he comes back as a whole human being now, because I've returned to the land. All my children are born. I can build the house of Israel. Now I am truly rectified. And he's back in the land. He followed the footsteps of his grandfather Abraham. But doesn't stop there. If we go further, we see how Joshua, who leads the entire nation into the land of Israel, the first place they come after Jericho is mentioned in the Bible. You look at in the book of Joshua, chapter 8, if I recall, and you see how they come to the place of blessing and the curse, and they receive the covenant in the land of Israel, coming back to Itamar area, again on the mountain, 6 tribes of each mountain, and they receive the covenant in the land of Israel. So they're following that same pathway. Abraham, Jacob, and now Joshua. So Itamar represents the redemption, the return. But what's fascinating is we see the reversal as well. In other words, Joseph, when he was sold, where does he go to? He's all the way down in Hebron, means to unite, to connect. And he's sent up north to Shechem to connect with his brothers. But his brothers weren't ready for that. And they saw him, he went further north, and he was thrown in a pit and then sold to Egypt. So we see that the exile began at the same location as well. But not only on an individual basis, the tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel, after King Solomon had a son named Rechavam, who was taking over for King Solomon, there was another servant called Yerovam, or Jeroboam. And we know the kingdom split also in Shechem by Itamar. That's where the kingdom split into 2 kingdoms, which represents the downfall of Israel. When we split, not being unified as one brothers, and that is where exile began as well. So we see on a micro scale of Abraham coming back to the land, and of course Jacob, and we see all of Israel coming there, and then we see this split on a micro scale of Joseph, the brothers, and then the whole nation splits over there. But thank God today we are blessed to be on Itamar soil. After 2,000 years of exile, in 1967, the miracle of the 6-Day War, Israel was returned to its land, and we have returned to Itamar forever. And that's where we are, continuing the pathway of our forefathers, which will never be severed or broken forever.
Amen.
It's a little story about the city of Shechem and our area, Itamar, where we live.
Lots of history.
Lots of history.
Yeah. Most of it.
It's just so amazing. But you see how powerful this is. It's just something that you
When
can't
the spiritual journey
The
that
spiritual journey doesn't end.
There's a lot of archaeological evidence
I
to it
was
too.
just going to ask you about that.
About
Really?
the altar on
Yes.
Mount Ebal, which was discovered by a secular archaeologist at first, who very quickly morphed into being a believer after seeing the
Wow,
evidence
sure.
of that. And everywhere you look, in every corner, I had representatives of the State Department that came to see us, because I asked them to, as an American citizen, and they came like this, and they left like this. Speechless, because every view is history. It's your identity. It's amazing.
It's really, and it's extremely, it's living literally back in the Garden of Eden, I call it. So he said, what is Itamar like? And I said, life. That's what I mean.
It's the return.
You feel it right there when you're there. So we feel that connection. It's so powerful. But
Do you ever lose the grandeur of where you're at?
Never.
never. We always, I said, I never get bored of it. We can go up to those mountains and every day feel
Never,
that,
never,
feel
never.
that
It
energy.
feels awesome.
And we, and we take a lot of people up there. Whoever comes to see.
We want to take you.
Okay, and I want to go.
Yes.
And others are going to, yes, and others are going to want to go. So tell them how to get in contact
Yes.
with you.
Tour Itamar, support Israel.
.com.
.com.
We also have an easier way, friendsofetamar.org. It hooks up to the same site.
Okay.
And that's that's our organization, Friends of Itamar. We have on our website, we also have Facebook called Itamar Israel Support Group on Facebook. But if they want to contact us on our website, they will have information, contact information, where they can find us. And we would love to host you all on Itamar.
And we would all like to come.
Amen.
Rabbi Moshe, Leah, thank you so
much.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.
What a joy to meet you in person and have you. And please, when you're coming back through the States, please
Yes.
stop by.
Amen.
Give us reports of what's going on.
Okay.
It should be a good
And may
report.
God richly bless all that you do, because I know that your focus is on
Mhm.
glorifying Him
Amen.
and His
Amen.
work in this world to bring people into a place of real peace.
Amen.
Amen.
And thank you so much for watching the interview. You know, you are a blessing to ITVN. You truly are. Go on the website, find out what the Rabbi and Leah are doing, and get involved. Support that work. The Jewish people are amazing, and you will find that out when you go and you visit with them. God bless you. We will see you next week. Shalom, shalom.